Welcome to Beyond Talking Points from Little Visionaries Bookstore. I'm Bridgitte Jackson-Buckley, and today I'm speaking with Vanessa O'Brien. Vanessa O'Brien is a British mountaineer and an American mountaineer, dual citizenship, explorer, aquanaut, public speaker, and author of To the Greatest Heights, Facing Danger, Finding Humility, and Climbing a Mountain of Truth. There it is.
Yay,
Welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Bridgitte. It's great to be here.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. From consumer accounts for many large banking firms to novice and now record holder, summiting Mount Everest in 2012 and diving in a submersible to the eastern pool of Challenger Deep in 2020, how did the transition come about from banking to climbing to aquatics?
Yes, right. And maybe space one day, who knows, right? This whole adventure world keeps changing. You know, first and foremost, I think it's having a sense of curiosity, which, all children have. And it's just what happens to that curiosity over time, whether it gets sort of buried within ourselves or whether it blossoms over time. Sometimes there's a catalyst for change, and sometimes people just look for change. And sometimes, even amongst the catalyst, I think of things like the pandemic. Look at how our lives have changed even in this short period of time. We're Zooming from our homes. So many people are now working from home. And big businesses like Airbnb and WeWork and things like that, went up and down and in and out. And, the world changes at such a dramatic pace, it's hard to keep up. For me, I did have a catalyst. I was working and in a financial services industry, and we had one of those great recessions. I think it may even be called the Great Recession around 2008-9, and financial services. This was around the subprime mortgages, and financial services was out, and my job was no longer really, one that was needed, and I was looking for something different to do. Around the same time, my husband was looking at an international move, which is a huge catalyst for anybody who does something like that. And I just jumped in with both feet. And that in and of itself created a lot of pause for consideration. I found myself in Hong Kong, and so there were language barriers, there were working barriers, there were, friendship barriers, and, trying to sort of refine myself after not really working for probably my whole life. I was probably one of those people who, from the time that they could think and process and walk and talk, had the babysitting job or the paper route or the, the part-time job at Burger Chef, which doesn't exist anymore, but you can get an idea of what that's like. So always working to suddenly not working and trying to find yourself and redefine, what your values are and what's important to you. And also being a really kind of, I'll say type A, because your listeners will know what that means, but a person of a certain higher energy where their sense of purpose comes from what they contribute to, their what they do during the day. And so when you're not doing anything during the day, it's slightly depressing to not contribute anything to anything during the day. And so that whole thing wraps around your psyche and your sense of value and your sense of worth. So I found myself really being in this new place and having to really think about, who I was and what was important to me. And that's about the time I found mountaineering. And it really started as probably just walking and clearing my head and walking and thinking things through and walking and walking and walking. And suddenly I was, making lists, and the list started, trying to find a sense of purpose. And then suddenly out of the blue, somebody said, well, why not climb Everest? And it was like, what? Where is it? Yeah. How high is it? I vaguely remembered it had been done before, but, I was a bit, the details weren't all there. And of course, I'm married to a British, subject who had all the details very clearly in his head. So, I don't think in those early days, anybody really took took me seriously, but I was a disciple of Jack Welch in the GE days in a training program, and he did impart to his trainees, speed, confidence, and self-confidence, simplicity, and speed. And so, those were things you really could take anywhere. And I thought, well, you don't know really until you give it a go. And I thought, okay, well, I'll try it and see what this whole thing about mountaineering is like. And that's how the whole thing started. It really just started with a suggestion, and the suggestion blossomed into I'll try it in a training way. And then I tried it on a mountain, and then I just really never looked back.
Yes, so it seems. Okay, so you were talking about you have this curiosity, and then your statement alluded to my next question. Stephanie was the one that said she was going to climb Everest when you guys were you had made your list, and it piqued your interest. So in that moment, what piqued your interest about Everest?
I guess from a career perspective, in my career, I had always dealt in financial services with risk. And I guess, in the what I could remember from the films and the books that I had read pertaining to climbing and mountaineering was that it had an element of risk. And so when I first heard it, I in that 30-second flashback was sort of everything I could remember that conjured up in my head. And of course, there's everything you don't know as well. And thinking, okay, what could I apply that I might already have, knowing what I know and have learned about risk, to this equation? Because most mountaineers don't come from a business world. They, at least in the old days, they were either military men, or they were, gentry men or something like that. But they would have come from a different stock. And I thought, well, maybe there's something here that could be interesting to test and to apply, or maybe not. I mean, but I was interested with the equation initially of risk. And then I thought, okay, that's what got me initially. Now, I think when she was joking, and there's this whole scene around, a drinking episode and evil spirits, and the spirits are alcohol. Who said what, when, and where, and does it evolve around a challenge? That's a playful way of introducing a topic, and this did occur. It is definitely a memoir, but like any sort of moment where things get confused, we're a little confused on the facts of how it evolved from there, because people do get quite under alcohol. They also get bold, so some people could say, oh, I could do that, right? And of course, the next day it's like, oh, no way in hell would I do that, right? So yeah. You can imagine that scene becoming much more flamboyant with characters saying, oh yeah, I could do that, and then the next day, I guess the litmus test is who in the next day is going to sit down at the keyboard and start researching and taking it to the next level. And that therein was the difference, and probably where the curiosity kicks the can further down the path, because I had enough curiosity to say, okay, so what's this all about? And that's what I also do in the book, is I take the reader with me on the journey, which I don't know many books that do, where we're Googling together, what is Everest? How high is it? We're learning together what this thing is. And I wanted them to go through that journey with me, because it was as foreign to me as when I started as it was in the book.
Yes, you do. You do a very good job in the book of taking us on the journey with you. There was a ton of research you had to do. But I'm curious. Okay, so then you're saying that you were curious about the risk factor. Is that correct? What about the risk intrigued you? So that would normally make somebody, normally somebody might say, risk, no, I don't want to do that, but you went towards it.
Yeah, I guess I went towards it because, I guess it's the difference between risk, which is an element of can the knowledge and experience tilt the scales of risk towards succeeding, or is it chance? And there's just nothing you can do to succeed or fail. Okay. And what I was curious about and would come to really try to explore and did not know at all in those early days is how much could you learn and control to succeed in this in mountaineering. And I did come to learn that there were many things that I could never control. I thought I could control more. And as the book shows, I become very humbled because I come from, a business background where, lots of type A's and big egos and stuff like that. And I am very much stripped of my egos very early on by Mother Nature, who I understand very quickly is a greater presence. And if I don't, in my opinion, if I don't start to understand the rules in which she applies, then I am out. So in the first principle, there is a force greater than any force that I have to learn and acquiesce to, and then the rest of it can come in line. But in the beginning, I don't even understand Mother Nature.
Right. I mean, and that speaks to, because there was an avalanche. I mean, and leading into, in the prologue, you write about that K2 is the second highest mountain on the planet at 28,251 feet. It's brutal cold, constant avalanches, falling rock, tricky technical climbs, predictably dire weather conditions are legendary. It's a grueling test of physical endurance. Nothing keeps you there but sheer determination. And then you have a quote by an anonymous climber: mountain climbing is extended periods of intense boredom, interrupted by occasional moments of sheer terror. So I would imagine in those moments, you really do understand there's not a lot you can control.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a beautiful quote because you can imagine going, that's 0 to 60, right? Where, you're not on at all. And all of a sudden you've got all those chemical reactions flowing through and you're completely on and, aware of everything. So, it is, it's an amazing place to be. And I've come to really learn and understand so much. And, to some extent, I've been very fortunate to be able to do the things that I've done. Of course, anybody looking backwards in a rearview mirror would never really say that they want to do anything differently. But I was fortunate to do a lot of mountains once and succeed once until K2. And then those 3 years it took me to climb may have held me back in summiting mountains, but taught me so much more about, culture and people and life and, other things that were so much more valuable than, say, a quick succession of a peak.
Yes, because it was so much more than that. And I'm skipping around, but a quick succession of a peak. That just makes me, it made me think about the part of the book where you described, I think it was the summit of Everest, and it was the size of a king-size mattress. And there was so much effort to get to the summit. And then you were there momentarily and you had to get your pictures taken and get down. So it seemed like, it just seemed like the summit is such a short, small thing, but everything is about the summit. It's all about getting there. But once you get there, you're just like, okay, it's beautiful, and we leave.
Yes, and then of course you learn very quickly that the summit's not the goal, and
yes,
it's round trip. And and so I always say to people, would you ever stop at mile 13.1 of a marathon and say, woohoo, I'm halfway? Of course not. You're only halfway, and that's what a summit is. But society has turned us to look at the top of the mountain and somehow celebrate this. But if you don't come down alive, there's nothing to celebrate. We clock the summit as like the goal. But what's the point if you don't come down alive?
Yeah.
And this was made really evident by, Mallory and Irving in the early days of the pursuit of Everest, and capitalized more by maybe Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, who were the first to kind of come down and make it alive and become the most decorated mountaineers in history. But, those that couldn't prove it and weren't there to talk about it, it wasn't a round trip. It wasn't a full, you couldn't validate success. But somehow we still chose the summit as the pinnacle.
Okay, and then you also write, so much. A climber can easily slip into a deep crevice and disappear into an icy abyss. They can get crushed by a tumbling serac or make some fatal mistake. They can succumb to sickness, edema, exhaustion, or hypoxia. They can fall, freeze, or simply fail to wake up. 377 people have summited and 84 died there at the writing of To the Greatest Heights. And these are sobering facts, Vanessa, very sobering facts. So it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around the intensity of such an environment. So I'm just wondering, considering everything that could go wrong, what is the mental state you or any climber would have to be in to voluntarily choose to walk into such an environment? I guess I know this is not a good example, but when I was reading, I was thinking, walking over hot coals, like, there's going to be some pain, but I was like, no, because it's so quick. But Everest is a totally different ballgame. So what kind of mental state would you have to be in to walk into that?
I think somewhere once I had seen a list of the most dangerous jobs, and this was not the first or anything like that. I think it came down to like oil rigging, with explosions and stuff like that. But you think about people who really do dangerous things, much less, people who are on the front lines of war or war on terrorism and stuff like that. That there are real things, business or military, where people really do go and put their lives on the line. This is not, we're not fighting, an enemy here. We are trying to get to a place, perhaps, that is not suitable for long-term human survival. We could argue that, because the death zone, one cannot live, let's say, for more than 24 hours because of the higher you climb, the lower the atmospheric pressure. So we'll call it that into thin air without getting too technical. So for me, and this is true much later in my expeditions, as I became a more, and certainly this is true for K2, I always wanted to go and do science. So to collect like glacier samples or things like this. And so this was a way to give back. So my expeditions were no longer about just getting to the summit, but they were there to gather glacial samples to show whether there was contamination in the mountains or other things. So there were other reasons to go that would contribute to knowledge on a global basis. That's not necessarily coming through in the book because it's not as fun or funny or, but there were other reasons to be there and to get higher and to, succeed in getting to where we were going. It's a great personal challenge to be able to do that. It's I guess it's one of, I'll say adventure is learning about yourself when you succeed. Exploration is being able to give something back, like sampling. That's why I always try to do something more for external, that's not just for myself. And of course, the reason it took me 3 years on K2 was one, I got one camp higher every season, and that gave me data, and data turned into, hope, and hope turned into, hey, I have knowledge in this data, and maybe I can get one more each time. But there's no negating what I wrote or what you read, that if the environment and climate change makes it worse, are so hostile, you have to be able to read the signs and turn around if it's too dangerous.
Okay.
You know, just before I came on with you now, I'm reading reports of my K2 summit partner who's died on K2, and you know, his body's been left up there, and I'm in angst over what to do about it. You know, there's always, the mountain is it's Reinhold Messner's famous quote that says, "Mountains aren't fair or unfair; they're just dangerous." So you really have to balance that individual desire and what you're there for, and try to understand when to turn back. And there's no easy answer. You know, you can't just say somebody took more risk, or, you know, the conditions turned against them. You know, I just hate to put myself in somebody's shoes and try to make that judgment, because you can never, some people have an easy time on an easy year. Some people struggle really, really hard in a hard year. In 2017, we were the only team to make it, and we struggled. Everybody has their own experience. It's really, I just hate to pass judgment. It's such a personal thing when you're there. Teams differ every year, conditions differ every year. But I will say, unlike mountains in the past, now we have climate change, and things that used to be frozen like rock are now unfrozen. So we have another element of risk where rockfall happens that never happened in the past. So it's much more dangerous, in my opinion, to climb today, even though supposedly weather and things like that are more readily available on technological devices, but that doesn't necessarily help, because the weather and the frequency and the variability of those weather patterns they make no sense, and they change so radically. They're unpredictable.
Well, I am definitely sorry to hear about your friend. I know that's a part of this experience, that could happen and does happen. And I like that you said, you know, yes, you want a summit, you want to get there. You know, the summit is the goal that you're trying to do, but there's so much that happens along the way to get there. But it's very important to be able to assess when you need to stop, when you need to turn around and go back. And you write about that. I mean, you didn't turn back at this time, but I understand what you're saying from reading this section about I think it was about Everest. And, you know, there was a lot going on. You had been threatened by a fellow climber. He told you to watch your back for his own personal reasons. Then the elastic on your headlamp broke. And am I pronouncing this correctly? Finjo Dorji, the Sherpa assisting you, had to climb 10 steps and then literally look back so that you could have the light to see where you were going to climb. And it just seemed like everything that could possibly go wrong, well, not everything, but a lot was going wrong. And you were so close, you can't even see where you're going. And I thought that was just an amazing act of collaboration and service that he did in the midst of ice, snow, mountains, and climbing, to turn around to help you. You would not have been able to do that without his assistance. But even in that moment, something I can't remember, was something fell down the moment, and you just let out this long, you know, like profane. And I was like, oh my gosh, I understand when you're trying so hard to do something and just these little things keep going wrong. And you can, in your mind, interpret it as, maybe we should just stop. Maybe we're not supposed to be here, but you didn't in that particular moment.
Yeah, that was such a great, that was Everest, and it was such a great moment, because it was the accumulation of things right from the beginning, when I put on that extra layer and started to overheat, which I had never done in my life. But it was Everest, Everest, Everest. And I thought, oh, you know, of course it's going to be cold. And, you know, here I am overheating from like 3 steps in. You know, all those accumulation of things were a wonderful experience. And you know, it's such a joy to be able to write about them. And to get feedback on writing about them from other people, because it's like, oh, I can't believe you said that. That's so, you know, it's happened to me. It's that, you know, these things are so obviously, they happen to people. But, you know, the great turning point to that is when the mind starts to take over and talk you into failure. That
Oh, yeah.
it starts to take over and say this, these are all the reasons you should cut your losses, you should turn around, you should, do this, it just starts to talk you down. And it wasn't until that, that little voice out of nowhere that just started counting and doing that 99 bottles of beer on the wall, which was such a great distraction technique, but important because it wasn't a circular reference like row, row, row your boat. That just got me up and over and working with what was left and the tools that I had. So did I need my own light? No, I needed a light, right? I needed, I had the stars above, I had the succession of everybody's headlamps above me, but it didn't have to be my light, although I would have appreciated not carrying extra batteries, as I was joking. And working with what you have. And that was what was the important sort of, memory from that was, to switch the focus. And it's so easy for us to, I think about the marathon I would run later, and, it's so easy for us to get in a bad mood and just to become like, destructive in our thoughts about what we're doing and we don't like, instead of just switching that focus into, fast forward to the end game, and it's over, and we're done, and it's behind us. And that's the first time I think that's ever happened to me, where I could really differentiate and see those two things happening simultaneously. And that was so important for later on.
But that, and you write about this as well, you can't do something like this without rewiring your brain. And even in that moment where that's such a great point, Vanessa, I didn't need my light, I needed a light.
Yep. Sometimes
the things we need come in unexpected ways, and, but there it is, so be grateful for that. But I like that in these difficult moments, like moments of crisis, like you have a decision, and it is really easy to plummet mentally. The victim, poor me, damn, this is so hard. Why did I even come here? But to make the choice to go to what was it? Was the 99 bottles of beer? I mean, that was my favorite part of the book. Well, that and the part when Jonathan said that, he might have liked to just have you thrown in a crevice. I laughed for like 5 minutes because I know or that he would leave you because he had to sign like the body election form, which I didn't even know you had to do. And he joked, of course he didn't mean something like that, but it was just a funny, lighthearted moment in the midst of all of this. But going back to that, choosing to not let your mind go there, you also write about, in the context of mountaineering, the descent is where most deaths occur. And I thought that this was just a wonderful parallel between difficult crisis moments in our life and when you were going up that mountain without your headlamp. And after all of that and all those problems, you had to come back down, and then the descent is where most deaths occur, and probably the most life as well. The most fear, the most this is great. The most loneliness, the most come to Jesus moments. But you don't let yourself go there.
It's so true. Even on that first descent, when I don't make it up Everest and I play back like a slow film, all the things I did wrong, that's a descent. The descent is when, and the descents are technically harder because you've got gravity pushing on your back. It's so easy to slip and fall, and, whether it's scree, just tiny little stones, or whether it's, it's still going downhill. People think of the effort to lift your leg, but the effort not to slide. I was hiking last week, nothing to do with this surgery, but hiking, I realized that people never were really shown how to go downhill, and that a lot of people lean. And when you lean, you're putting your weight backwards, which is making it so easy for your feet to slip out forward and to have you fall on your bum. And it's like, wow, just simple things like that. Nobody really is ever taught how to go up and down a hill. And nobody really ever stops to share knowledge because they don't want to be, you know, the know-it-all, or they don't want to be, you know, but I just don't look at it that way. I just always like to, you know, say, hey, you know, have you thought about this? Or this is what I've always, you know, been taught, or, you know, if you want to try this or something like that. And they don't have to take it, but at least, you know, knowledge is passed. I know the best people that I've ever climbed or worked with have always shown me something, or I've at least watched. So anyway, but yeah, the most interesting things definitely happen on descent, as well as the most scary moments, for sure.
And then on page 33, you write, whatever is lying dormant comes out at high altitude. And again, a lot has to do with fear. Fear is what happens in our own heads, a judgmental voice that decrees you have no right, you don't deserve, you aren't enough for something that's good to work. So it really seems like in the midst of, you know, I guess like with anything, whether you're on the mountain, whether you're at home in your own personal life with a relationship, whether it's an employment scenario, like when you are in the midst of those really challenging moments, you can really get to see what's beneath the surface that has, you know, been hidden, has been suppressed, or not been dealt with, because it's going to come up, you know, because you're being triggered, like you're forced to feel a lot of emotions that you don't normally feel, and beliefs come up.
Absolutely. I think, you know, every climb is emotional, no matter how big or how small, and you're always vulnerable. You know, so, and look, it even happens with fights, you know, teams fight and fall out, and, you know, different things happen, and, you know, hopefully people, you know, can maintain it just for the mountain and be bigger when they come off of the mountain and put it in perspective. But, you know, there's just extreme stress, and, you know, you're constantly on alert. You know, you're constantly listening for problems, for avalanches, for things like that. It's just not a normal situation for 6 weeks to have your senses on overload like that, and then to come back and your biggest problem is, you know, gee, you know, what when you're walking down the cereal aisle, you know, what kind of cereal you buy today. It's life and death versus the mundane. And that's why mountaineering and, you know, getting to base camps and things like that work as a really good metaphor for, you know, team building, or, you know, some of the business problems that are out there, because it puts everything else into perspective. You don't argue over cost centers, or argue over, you know, who gets what, or, you know, it's survival. and at its, you know, at its basic level, getting there as a team is the most important thing, and focusing on the priorities, and all this other stuff is just noise.
Yes,
and it makes sense also from a human perspective and human nature, because there's a lot of psychology and behavior to it. And that's why mountaineering as a metaphor works in life. And that's why all these thoughts that come into our head, how we behave as individuals, how we behave in teams, also is important, you know, because it's going to be the shadows of ourselves, from the best and the worst. And it will come out. So we have to know how to deal with that, and how to put those things in check, you know, when real danger is present.
Right. And of course, so when you started doing all of this, you know, obviously you would discuss it with your husband, Jonathan, and you have tremendous respect for Jonathan's opinion. But I just wanted to point out, I appreciate that you write about that you felt you didn't need anyone's permission to do this. And the point is about that is that when you're drawn to do something, sometimes we're the only one who understands the call. He was willing to trust you and to support you and to go along with this, but it seems as though you were going to do this. The decision was made. And it's like sometimes when that call is just so strong, like you have to do it. You're not always going to do it just for the goal, but of course you're doing it for the goal, but there's a lot that's going to happen on that journey. And sometimes we're compelled to do things for the journey that we're going to go on to get to the goal. So what was the most surprising aspect of yourself, like a personal characteristic that mountain climbing emphasized in you?
Let's see. You know, I am lucky in that, you know, when I think back about, you know, partnerships and, you know, people who have, you know, supportive partners. Sure, Jonathan, he goes by Spousey in the book, but, you know, he could have said no. And I'm sure, you know, it was definitely leaning toward no's, you know, especially as K2 became, you know, a three-year series or box set DVD, you know. And I think I say something like, I don't know what calls a salmon to swim upstream or something like that in an analogy, but I guess you also know the person that you are partnered with. And so the thing that brings you together, you know, for him not to honor the part that he likes in me would be for him not to like me, if that makes sense. So, you know, it's a hard equation. I think about other people who have, like, you know, just strong committed partners, and they're hard because, of course, you know, I can't really choose Hollywood because they break up all the time. But, you know, it's important to have a good partner if you can find one, because, you know, that support network goes a long way. They don't have to be with you, but just knowing that they're there, you know, is a lot. It's a lot off your mind, you know, mentally and emotionally.
Yes.
And again, you know, there are times when my friends play that role too. And, you know, there's times when you want to call your friends and you don't want to call your partner because, you know, they're different topics, right? You tell your girlfriend something you might not tell your husband. But, you know, I think for me, probably I have a really strong focus, a really strong determination. You know, these types of characteristics. I remember the last personal trainer I worked with. I think and keeping in mind that, you know, I approached this a little later in life, you know, probably after the age of 40, and stood at the top of K2 at 52. He said something like he had never seen somebody with so much a sense of concentration, is the way he termed it. So I guess when he assigned me to do this, that, or the other, and, you know, maybe they were rowing or, you know, then moving on to push-ups or moving on to something else, he was like, I've just never seen somebody with such a sense of concentration. So whether it's concentration or focus, I say focus, he says concentration, but the point is, like, if I was given something, I was on it. I also quite like, you know, execution. So I don't like to talk about something. I actually like to do it. And people have commented that a lot of people talk about stuff, but I am unusual in that I actually like to make things happen. I like to see something go from conception to implementation. And, you know, so I might be less of a visionary in creating things, but I really like this part here in making it happen and seeing that take place. So maybe I'm better in the middle than in the front part, in seeing it through and making it happen. And I don't mind how high I have to go or how detailed I have to go. I can do either. So probably those are the strengths.
Okay. And you that is shown very, very well, very, very clearly in the book, because the level of planning, it was just amazing. The detailed planning, I mean, you had to account for so much, but the collaboration was just wonderful to witness in the story. Okay, so last question, Vanessa. Climbing mountains is physically stimulating and representative of health, freedom, and movement. So with regards to just waking up in the morning and feeling excited for your life, and if we juxtapose getting out of bed to train and or climb with getting out of bed to go do banking, how did the level of excitement for your life for just being alive change?
So I think it increased to a level of excitement, but that was because I now had a project and a sense of purpose. So I think if anyone could do this, if they are moving to something that builds upon something that they are excited about. So it doesn't have to be, it could have been banking at one time when I first had that job. I was just as excited to get out of bed.
Okay.
And I was just as excited to start the climbing when I started learning more and doing the research and starting my fitness regime and changing that fitness regime over time as I learned new information. I think that we are excited to get out of bed when we realize that we have something new. I was excited to get out of bed when I started writing the book, because I'd sleep and I'd say, well, wait, is that in there? Or how do I put that in there? And is that as important? Let me take that out. And the thing is when we start thinking about something and that we want to contribute to, we get excited. And it could be anything. It could be anything that we get excited about. I am excited today, probably around climate, around women empowerment, and health.
Yes.
And probably more women's health, around some of the things like, anti-aging, hormones, some of the things that I'm hearing, here and there, and I want to learn more. And then I want to share that. So the more that I learn and the more that I build on this, I'm like, I want to learn more. So, all of these things could take me in a different direction. Climbing is slightly related to, this expedition world, women's empowerment, all of these things can be used for that. Health is slightly different, but, related, that we all need good health to do anything that we want in life.
Well, I like what you say about purpose, about,
Yeah,
we're excited about something when we have something with purpose, because anytime, the question is always there, what's my purpose? What am I here to do? And, your purpose is not always something that you do for a living, but you are on purpose if you're taking actions where you feel inspired, wonder, openness, curiosity, where the energy is forward moving energy. It's like, it's saying, go there, and I think as long as you're following that, you're on purpose. I don't know if I would follow my go there if it led me to cold. I went to Boston a couple of years ago in December. I have not been back, Vanessa. I felt like I had razors going through me, but the point is, like, yeah, just follow the excitement, the curiosity, your face lights up, about when you're talking.
Correct. If
You're not going to be mistaken.
Correct. If your eyes are like lighting up and you've got a smile on your face and you want to know, you literally want to know more. And there's your litmus test. You are excited and you can build these layers and you can like start to get involved in stuff. And I've got to think that these can lead to paying things, right? Our world is shifting in terms of paying things. I don't see the cradle to the grave jobs that we had before. I see great teams coming together for, to create, teams coming together to solve problems for individuals and then disperse.
Yes.
And whatever that is. And companies will need these teams all the time to solve problems and disperse. Mm-hmm. And it could be anything. So I just think as this changes, we may have to teach the companies how to engage with us. That may be how it works.
Oh, I like that. I like that. Yes. Teach the companies how to engage with us. And I am, like you, very interested in collaboration and the conscious movement and being of service and being an inspiration, because once you're there, you never know the impact that you're having, how you're affecting other people that you don't talk to or that you don't see, just by them seeing what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how much love you have for it, and generosity in that love. I'm definitely interested in that as well. And for anyone, women and men, that is initiating a sense of empowerment.
Yes.
And health, because you just have a zest for life. Okay.
Thank you so much, Bridgitte. It's been so much fun. Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you. We hope you enjoyed listening to this conversation. Again, I was speaking with Vanessa O'Brien. Little Visionaries is an independent bookstore that, beyond selling books, hosts community-focused interviews and author events. Remember, the best way to support your local independent bookstore is as simple as buying a book. On June 12, 2020, Vanessa became the first woman to reach Earth's highest and lowest points, receiving a Guinness World Record. She became the first American woman to climb K2 and the first British woman to climb K2 as a result of her dual citizenship. She is a fellow of the Royal Geographic Society and an honorary advisory board member of the Scientific Exploration Society. To learn more about Vanessa, visit vobonline.com. Thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you.